Our Lady of Champion, the USA's only approved Marian apparition. Many have heard of the Blessed Virgin Mary's apparitions in such places as Lourdes, Paris, Guadalupe, and Fatima. Yet few realize that she also appeared in the United States, in the quiet countryside of Wisconsin, to a young woman named Adele Brise. This wondrous apparition, known today as Our Lady of Champion, took place in 1859 and remains the only Marian apparition in the United States formally approved by the Church. The shrine in Champion, Wisconsin, welcomes visitors daily, yet surprisingly, many Americans have never heard its story. I myself only learned of it recently, and the moment I did, I felt compelled to share it, so that others, both here in the USA and beyond, might come to know the remarkable grace given on our own soil during the pioneer days of America. So sit back and enjoy the story of Adele Brise and Our Lady of Champion. And if you have ever visited this shrine, please leave a comment describing your experience. In the early 1850s, a young Belgian farmer named Francois traveled to the city of Antwerp on business. One afternoon, he stopped at a local tavern, where his attention was drawn to a vividly printed publication lying on a table. Curious, he picked it up and began to read. Printed by the Immigration Office, the brochure painted a glowing picture of life across the ocean in the United States of America. It promised rich, fertile land in the state of Wisconsin, available for just $1.25 an acre, perfect for growing wheat, corn, oats, rye, barley, and vegetables. The brochure went on to assure readers of America's freedoms of speech and religion, and the boundless opportunities awaiting those ready to work hard. Francois read these glowing assurances with keen interest. In his native Belgium, the countryside was overcrowded and farmland prohibitively expensive. By selling his own modest property, he could acquire 100 times as much land in America for the same price. Upon returning home, he shared his discovery with family and neighbors, describing this distant country where hard work might be rewarded and faith freely practiced. Before long, he and 9 fellow farmers sold their small holdings, said farewell to family and friends, knowing it was unlikely they would ever meet again, and prepared for departure. On May 18, 1853, they boarded the ship the Kennebec and set sail for America. Upon their arrival, a series of providential encounters brought them into contact with Father Edward Dames, pastor of Bay Settlement in northeastern Wisconsin, 10 miles north of Green Bay. Fluent in French, Father Dames could converse easily with the group and spoke enthusiastically of the beautiful and fertile land surrounding his parish. He told them of other Belgian settlers who had already established themselves there, farmers known as Walloons, who came from Wallonia, the French-speaking Catholic region of southern Belgium. At Bay Settlement, Father Dames assured them, they would be able to attend Mass, receive the sacraments, and worship in their native tongue. Convinced that Providence had guided their steps, Francois and his companions followed the priest to the settlement and purchased land some 10 miles to the northeast, an area that in time would come to be known as Robinsonville. On June 9, 1855, inspired by letters from fellow Belgians who had already emigrated to America, Lambert and Marie Catherine Brise decided to follow their example. They boarded a ship bound for the United States with their 3 daughters, Esperance, age 27, Adele, 24, and Isabel, 20, along with their 5-year-old nephew Vital. As the vessel pulled away from the Belgian coast, Adele stood on deck, watching the familiar shoreline fade into the horizon. She knew, with quiet conviction, that she was looking for the last time upon her native land. Within her heart was a mixture of joy and sorrow. There was excitement about the new world that awaited her, yet deep melancholy at leaving behind everything that had shaped her youth and formed her dreams. Memories of her life in Belgium flooded her thoughts. Born on January 30th, 1831, in Dionne-la-Vallée, Belgium, her schooling had been limited, but she had attended a small Catholic grade school conducted by the Ursuline sisters, whose example had impressed her deeply. After making their first communion, Adele and a few close friends vowed to the Blessed Virgin Mary that one day they would join a missionary order and travel to distant lands to teach the children and spread the faith. Adele's childhood, however, had not been without suffering. A tragic accident had occurred when liquid lye splashed in her face. She lost the sight in her right eye and had permanent disfigurement on that side of her face. Nevertheless, Adele remained steadfast in her goal to consecrate her life to God as soon as she reached maturity. When her parents announced their plans to emigrate to America, her hopes collapsed. The promise she had made to the Blessed Virgin seemed impossible now. Distraught, she had sought the counsel of her parish priest, confiding her anguish over whether to obey her parents or remain in Belgium to pursue her vocation. The priest had advised her to accompany her family, assuring her that if God truly wished her to become a nun, he would open the way in America. Though her heart was heavy, Adele resolved to submit to God's will. As the ship sailed westward across the open sea, she prayed silently, entrusting her future to divine providence and pledging to devote herself to her family's welfare and to whatever mission God might yet reveal. After a comparatively smooth 7-week voyage, the Brise family arrived at the port of New York and soon journeyed westward. On August 7, 1855, Lambert and Marie purchased 240 acres of farmland near Red River, Wisconsin. With the resilience of a pioneer, Adele threw herself into the hard labor of frontier life. She worked beside her mother and sisters to clear and cultivate the soil, and along with the other women of the settlement, she would carry grain on her head for miles to the nearest grist mill to be ground into flour for the family's use. She also helped produce wooden shingles to be sold in Green Bay, a form of trade through which many Belgian immigrants supplemented their income in the New World. For the first 4 years of her new life in America, Adele Brise lived quietly and contentedly, her days marked by the steady rhythm of pioneer life with its hard work and simple joys. Since childhood, she had been known for her deep piety, gentle and humble spirit, love of neighbor, tender devotion to the Blessed Virgin, and fondness for the beauty of nature. Through all the changes of her life, she remained the same, simple, sincere, and full of faith. Despite her facial disfigurement, her inner radiance drew people to her. Adele often found comfort in the solitude of the surrounding woods, where the silence seemed filled with the presence of God, and she could contemplate the supernatural. The nearest Catholic church was 11 miles away in Bay Settlement. Yet each Sunday, through all kinds of weather, Adele made the journey on foot to attend Mass and receive the sacraments. Her heart held but one purpose: to serve God with love and faithfulness. One clear October morning in 1859, she set out along an old Indian trail in the woods toward the grist mill, balancing a heavy sack of wheat on her head. The sun shone brightly, yet under the dense canopy of trees, light barely touched the path ahead. She kept alert as she walked, mindful of the wild animals said to roam the area. Then, as she rounded a bend, she stopped in astonishment. Before her stood a woman, clothed entirely in white, surrounded with bright light, standing slightly elevated between a maple tree and a hemlock tree. The lady had a radiant and otherworldly presence that was attractive, yet at the same time unnerving. Adele thought the lady looked Belgian, but she did not recognize her as anyone from the settlement. As Adele stood transfixed, the vision slowly dissolved, leaving behind only a faint white cloud. Still shaken but determined, Adele continued her errand to the mill and later returned home without any further encounters. When she told her parents of the strange apparition, they listened thoughtfully and suggested that perhaps she had seen a soul from purgatory in need of prayers. On Sunday, October 9th, Adele set out with her younger sister Isabel and a neighbor woman on the long 11-mile walk to attend Mass. The three walked along companionably, talking about life in the settlement and the latest letters from loved ones in Belgium. Their path followed the same forest trail Adele had taken only days earlier when she went to the grist mill. As they neared the bend where she had first seen the mysterious lady, there between the same two trees stood the figure again, much to Adele's dismay. She had already told her companions about the earlier vision, and they had agreed that it was perhaps a soul in need of prayers. Now, startled and uneasy, she cried out, "Oh, there is that lady again!" Her voice betrayed both exasperation and hidden fear. Though the others saw nothing, they sensed Adele's apprehension. As before, the vision lingered for several minutes, then slowly dissolved into a faint white mist. The women agreed that Adele should speak with the priest about it when they reached the church. After Mass, she poured out the whole story to Father Verhoff, her confusion, her fear, and every detail of what she had seen. He listened gravely, then counseled her not to be afraid. "If this apparition is from heaven," he told her, "it will appear again. And when it does, ask it in God's name who it is and what it wants of you." Strengthened by his words, Adele began the journey home with her sister and neighbor, joined now by a man who was cutting down trees for the Holy Cross Fathers in the settlement. As they neared the familiar spot, Adele's heart pounded, for the lady was there once more. Gathering her courage, she stepped closer and beheld the radiant figure more closely. The young woman was robed in a flowing white tunic that draped gracefully to her feet, a yellow sash at her waist. A crown of stars circled her head, and her long, golden, wavy hair fell loosely over her shoulders under a long white veil. Her face was serene and beautiful, and the brilliance that surrounded her was so intense that Adele could scarcely look upon her. Overcome with awe, Adele fell to her knees and, remembering the priest's advice, asked, "In God's name, who are you, and what do you want of me?" The radiant lady spoke at last. "I am the Queen of Heaven, who prays for the conversion of sinners, and I wish you to do the same. You received Holy Communion this morning, and that is well, but you must do more. Make a general confession and offer communion for the conversion of sinners. If they do not convert and do penance, my son will be obliged to punish them." Adele's bewildered companions whispered for her to tell them who the apparition was and why they could not see her. "Kneel," Adele said softly. "The lady says she is the Queen of Heaven." The beautiful lady turned her tender gaze toward the others and said, "Blessed are they that believe without seeing." Then, looking again at Adele, she asked gently yet firmly, "What are you doing here in idleness while your companions are working in the vineyard of my son?" A sudden remembrance pierced Adele's heart of the promise she had made as a child to devote her life to God's service. Her eyes welled up with tears as she asked, "What more can I do, dear lady?" "Gather the children in this wild country," Our Lady replied, "and teach them what they should know for salvation." Adele hesitated, filled with self-doubt. "But how shall I teach them when I know so little myself?" she asked. The lady replied, "Teach them their catechism, how to sign themselves with the sign of the cross, and how to approach the sacraments. That is what I wish you to do. Go and fear nothing. I will help you." As she spoke, the soft light around her brightened into a glow that seemed to illuminate the forest around them. Raising her hands in blessing over the kneeling group, Our Lady's gaze lingered with love. Adele threw herself on the ground, her forehead touching the earth. Slowly the vision faded, and the silence of the dense, dark woods enveloped them once more. It did not take long for word to spread about Adele's encounter with the lady. Among the pioneers, most believed her story, yet others ridiculed her, claiming that she was either delusional or making it up for attention. Still, Adele's family never doubted her for a moment. Her father, Lambert, built a small 10 by 12-foot chapel near the spot where Adele had seen the Queen of Heaven. Inside the humble chapel, Adele placed an image of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, a gift from Father Verhoff. From that time onward, Adele's life was forever changed, and the guidance of Our Lady would continually lead her along the way towards fulfilling what became her life's work. It was a challenging time for Catholics in the New World. Immigrants, clustered in settlements according to their native tongues and customs, often had no common language linking them to neighboring communities. This isolation made it nearly impossible for parish priests to minister adequately to the growing population. Many Catholics slowly drifted from active practice of their faith, and although ethnic parishes eventually arose, they were few and far between, with too few priests to serve them. Opportunistic preachers soon came forward, proclaiming heresies and seeking to lure Catholics away from the faith of their ancestors. Amid this religious confusion and apathy, Our Lady gave Adele her mission. Though devout and diligent, Adele had little formal education and felt unworthy of such a responsibility. Yet her trust in God and His ways made it possible. The Blessed Mother had not asked for anything beyond Adele's abilities. She had simply instructed her to share with children the catechism that she herself had learned, and to foster in them the great love for God and for the Blessed Virgin that was drawn from the depths of her own heart. Adele welcomed any occasion to speak about the apparitions, and was always ready to clarify details or answer questions with quiet certainty. Without delay, she set out to find the children she was called to teach. For the next 7 years, Adele traveled a 50-mile radius, enduring every season's hardship, even the brutal Wisconsin winters, to fulfill the mission entrusted to her. The only available path was the old Indian Trail, used not only by the pioneers, but also by bears, deer, timber wolves, and an occasional bobcat. Though exhausted and footsore, she pressed on, knocking on cabin doors and offering to work in exchange for the chance to teach the children their catechism. The little ones loved her. One of her friends recalled of Adele that she had a sweet voice and possessed a charm that drew the young to her. Under her care, the children learned to know and love their Catholic faith. When she believed they were ready for the sacraments, Adele would escort them to the pastor at Bay Settlement Church. There, if they passed his examination of catechism knowledge, they would be permitted to make their first confession and receive their first communion. Sometimes she led groups of children to kneel before Our Lady's altar, where their young voices rose together with hers, singing hymns in French. The Kewanee Enterprise, a newspaper published in Kewanee, Wisconsin, from 1859 to 2007, described Adele with admiration. Her great piety, her disinterested zeal, her kind and sympathetic nature, and her blameless life soon won for her a respect among the people with whom she labored that was almost reverence. Word of the apparitions at Robinsonville continued to spread, drawing pilgrims in growing numbers to visit the site and the small log chapel Lambert Brise had built. In 1861, Lambert and several settlers constructed a larger chapel, measuring 24 by 40 feet. Above its doorway hung a French inscription that translated to, "Our Lady of Good Help, pray for us." This title for Our Lady was drawn from her words to Adele, "Go and fear nothing, I will help you." Inside, the chapel held simple, backless benches, and its sanctuary and altar were richly adorned with paintings, images, and silver plating. On one side wall hung crutches, left behind by those who had been healed of lameness through Our Lady's intercession. As the years passed, the number of children receiving religious instruction steadily increased. But Adele's strength diminished under the strain of constant travel through the wilderness. The new pastor of Bay Settlement, deeply impressed by her work, advised Adele to gather a few women to share her mission so that her ministry could continue to grow. She agreed, and with 3 devoted companions, founded a small lay community. They settled together in a farmhouse near the chapel. Rather than establishing a formal religious order, they became members of the Third Order Secular Franciscans. They lived according to the Franciscan way, but without formal vows, retaining their property and independence, and were free to leave if they chose. Their attire resembled the Franciscan habit in a simpler form. The group became known as the Sisters of Good Help, after the name of the chapel, although Adele herself preferred to call them the Sisters of St. Francis of Assisi. Over time, other women were drawn to join their number. Adele Brise, Adele's beloved sister, lived for a time at the school, although she never joined the Franciscan Third Order. One morning, Adele found that Isabel had died in her sleep. Encouraged by the pastor, Adele began raising funds to build a convent and a school where the children could come to learn instead of the sisters having to seek them out. With the pastor's letter of recommendation in hand, Adele and an English-speaking companion traveled throughout the region, petitioning for the necessary financial support. In 1864, a modest school and convent of wood frame construction were built on the chapel grounds, marking a new chapter in Adele's mission. By day, the classrooms were filled with children from nearby settlements, while at night a number of them stayed as boarders under the sisters' care. Adele always made sure that the children were well cared for and above all felt loved. Yet she soon realized that goodwill and donations alone could not sustain the growing mission. While contributions trickled in, expenses multiplied. Many settlers devoted to her cause accompanied Adele as she went from farm to farm seeking provisions, vegetables, grain, or a side of meat, to nourish both sisters and pupils. Often the children's families brought food and supplies, in grateful compensation for the free education. Still, Hardship was constant. One sister later recalled, "Often we did not know what we would have for breakfast." On such nights, Adele and her companions would kneel in the chapel and beg Our Lady for assistance. By morning, without fail, help had arrived, perhaps a sack of flour on the doorstep or a parcel of meat mysteriously left by a benefactor. By 1869, the school had officially become St. Mary's Boarding Academy. Tuition was just $1 per week, as Adele could never bear to turn a child away for lack of means. Lessons were taught in both French and English, and Adele oversaw the spiritual growth of the students, many of whom were orphans or children from struggling frontier families seeking a better life. Despite the modest fees, the sisters still relied heavily on donations to keep the school running. In an 1871 article, the Green Bay Advocate praised St. Mary's as a place of high character for usefulness and thoroughness in education, and encouraged public support. First Communion days were among the Academy's most cherished celebrations. The solemn Mass began at 8 in the morning, with the little chapel crowded to its doors, the girls in white dresses, the boys in their Sunday best. The boys sang hymns while the girls received communion, and in turn, the girls sang while the boys received. After Mass, there was a big dinner, and in the afternoon, the children renewed their baptismal vows. The older girls often accompanied Sister Adele into town, praying the rosary aloud as they walked. Visitors to the chapel constantly asked her for prayers, and so, gathering her pupils, Adele would lead the children in processions, beginning at the spot where Our Lady had appeared years before, praying for the intentions of every person who had requested it. One morning, on a journey by wagon to St. Joseph's Church in Bay Settlement, the horses bolted, throwing Adele from the wagon. Despite the injuries and physical limitations from the accident, she carried on with her duties of teaching the more than 100 children who boarded at the school. Her faithful helpers carried what burdens they could. Sister Maggie, who was a dressmaker, music teacher, and secretary for the school, took over some of Sister Adele's duties. Sister Annie managed the kitchen, laundry, and clothing repairs. Sister Louise, the baker, prepared bread and buns in the brick oven behind the laundry, eagerly assisted by the children. Each night, when quiet settled over the dormitories, Adele went from bed to bed, kneeling beside every child to pray and commend them to the protection of the Blessed Mother. Those who knew her believed that Adele often conversed silently with Our Lady, receiving comfort and direction in the stillness of her heart. The excellent reputation of the Sisters of Good Help steadily grew, winning them the affection and respect of settlers and clergy alike throughout the surrounding areas. On Sunday, October 8, 1871, the residents of Peshtigo, a town across the bay from Robinsonville, noticed nothing unusual as they went about their business. But that evening, as sunset faded, a fierce wind that howled like a living creature rose from the southwest, fanning distant brush fires, most likely from railroad construction workers, into a storm of flame. Within moments, the fires merged into what witnesses later called a fire tornado, a whirling pillar of heat so powerful it uprooted trees, lifted buildings from their foundations, and rained embers from the sky. As one survivor put it, all hell rode into town on the back of a wind. The storm of fire swept through the Wisconsin wilderness and, in just 2 terrible hours, erased everything in its path. A wall of flame, 10 miles wide and 40 miles long, devoured the forests and the towns of Peshtigo and Brussels, Wisconsin. Families fled toward the Peshtigo River, diving into the water as walls of fire closed in from all sides. Mothers clutched their children beneath the waves, coming up only long enough to take a gasping breath of the smoke-filled air. That same night, far to the south, the Great Chicago Fire also was burning, but the tragedy in Peshtigo was far worse. The inferno burned across more than 280,000 acres, consuming vast stretches throughout 8 counties. 1,152 lives were confirmed lost, another 350 missing and presumed dead, with more than 1,500 seriously injured and 3,000 left without homes. The property damage was over $5 million, not including the 2 million trees and untold numbers of animals that were also claimed by the flames. Although their story was overshadowed by the Chicago fire, today the Peshtigo fire remains the deadliest wildfire in American history. The wall of fire widened as it raced toward Robinsonville and the Chapel of Our Lady of Good Help. Faced with the fire's advance, Adele and the sisters wrestled with the dilemma of whether or not to evacuate. Yet, they could not abandon the little chapel built on the very ground where the Virgin Mary had appeared. Trusting in her protection, they chose to stay. From the surrounding countryside, farmers and their families, encircled by the fire, herded their livestock ahead of them and rushed toward the chapel, pleading for Mary's aid. Everywhere they looked, homes, barns, and sheds were swallowed by flames. Inside the chapel, Adele gathered the frightened crowd and lifted the statue of Mary. On her knees, she carried it in solemn procession around the sanctuary, while all present recited the rosary. For several hours, the scene outside was one of catastrophe: roaring fire, stifling smoke, and a night sky turned red. Then, in answer to their prayers, the sky opened and rain fell in a downpour, quenching the flames at last. When dawn broke, the survivors emerged to an overwhelming sight: a huge area of blackened devastation, over 50 miles long and 20 miles wide, stretched in every direction. Yet, amid that vast desolation, the chapel, convent, school, and the 5 acres dedicated to the Blessed Virgin remained an island of green among the ashes, miraculously untouched. The years that followed brought to Adele Brise a great expansion of her mission, but also trials and suffering. The work expanded beyond anything she had first imagined, yet with growth came misunderstandings and persecution. Word of the apparitions continued to spread exponentially after the miraculous preservation from the fire, drawing pilgrims from near and far. The school's reputation for excellence increased, but as its good name grew, so did opportunities for exploitation. Often, destitute or broken families left their children at the boarding school, offering a few months' tuition, then vanishing without a trace, never to return. This contributed to the mounting costs of food, clothing, school supplies, and medical care, further deepening the financial strain on the mission. In addition, the celebration of holy days, especially the Feast of the Assumption on August 15th, brought crowds of the faithful, but also opportunists, who introduced gambling, drinking, dances, and carnival attractions that created a circus atmosphere, marring the spirit of devotion. Reports of such disorder reached Bishop Joseph Melcher. Unacquainted personally with Adele or her work, he responded sternly, ordering that the chapel be closed and the sacraments withheld from Adele, warning her that if she continued to speak of the apparitions, she would face excommunication. In obedience, Adele went to the bishop when he demanded the keys to the chapel and school. But before doing so, she purchased a small plot of land nearby, intending to build a simple home where she could continue caring for and teaching the children. As she handed over the keys, Adele quietly but firmly reminded the bishop that the souls lost for lack of spiritual guidance would rest on his conscience. Struck by her fervor and sincerity, and deeply moved by her words, Bishop Melcher returned the keys and urged her to continue her good work. Adele's path was marked by trials and persecutions that would have broken many spirits. Yet her trust in Mary's maternal protection never faltered. Strengthened by grace, she not only endured adversity, but blossomed through it, her work expanding beyond what anyone could have foreseen. As more souls gathered around her mission, a larger chapel, school, and convent became necessary to meet the growing needs. Though the people of the region were poor, Adele placed her trust in the Queen of Heaven to provide the necessary funds. Her faith was rewarded. Francis Xavier Krautbauer, the second bishop of the Diocese of Green Bay, joined by 22 priests of the diocese, generously contributed to the building fund. In 1880, construction began. This time, the chapel would be built of sturdy brick, no doubt influenced by the tragic fire of 1871. By 1885, the new school, dormitory, and convent stood completed and was solemnly dedicated. In 1890, at the request of Sister Adele, the settlement of Robinsonville was renamed Champion after a town in Belgium. It was a gesture rooted in her childhood vow to the Virgin Mary, made long ago in Belgium, to one day join a religious order from that area. That same year, sorrow visited Adele through the death of her most faithful companion and helper, Sister Maggie. "It is a separation extremely hard to take," Adele wrote. "She was here 20 years with us, and she has always been so faithful to me." With Sister Maggie's passing, the once thriving work began to falter. Poor in health and unable to manage the growing weight of her duties as superior and school administrator, Adele entrusted management to a new young sister, a former student who had joined the community just 2 years earlier. The older sisters, long devoted to Adele and loyal to her gentle leadership, were deeply upset by the changes. In a wave of discontent, more than half of them departed together. Adele was heartbroken, fully conscious of her misjudgment. But she tearfully surrendered her sorrow to divine providence and continued to trust that the hand of God was at work. By then, only 3 sisters remained, and the number of students had dwindled dramatically. Adele herself grew weaker as her final days drew near. Her body failed, but her spirit remained serene and totally resigned to the will of God. She lingered near death for a while, speaking little during her final week, yet radiating the peace of one who had given all. Having received the sacraments of the dying, she continued to edify those around her by her obedience, holiness, and total devotion to the Blessed Mother. Every drop of her strength had been poured out in fulfilling the mission entrusted to her by Our Lady on that distant October day. On July 5, 1896, at the age of 66, Sister Marie Adele Joseph Brise surrendered her soul to God. Since the death of Adele Brise, the chapel and school she founded have witnessed seasons of change, renewal, and grace. In 1902, at the request of the Bishop of Green Bay, the Sisters of St. Francis of the Holy Cross assumed responsibility for the chapel and its work. The first to be sent there was Sister Pauline, who was stationed at a parish in Dulwich, Wisconsin. As she confided in her diary, "I left my loved mission to come to the chapel on October 28, 1902. I found 2 sisters, 20 children, and 42 cents." A woman of extraordinary faith and courage, Sister Pauline was undeterred by the meager circumstances. But by November 15th, all cash and provisions were gone, and the situation turned desperate. In her diary, she recorded, "We were out of bread, and I sent the children into the chapel to tell our dear mother that we were in need of bread. When our prayers were ended, there came a letter from our good bishop and $25. All I could say was, 'God bless and keep him.' From that time on, we never wanted for anything." Moved by the sisters' perseverance, the bishop soon arranged for fresh supplies and additional sisters from the mother house to continue the sacred work begun by Adele. With courage and devotion, the Sisters of St. Francis of Base Settlement carried forward her mission of teaching and instructing children in the faith. Through the following decades, the character and uses of the property evolved with the changing needs of the time. In 1933, the site became a home and school for children with disabilities, serving with compassion until its closure in 1953. That same year, the former school was transformed into an education and formation center for young women discerning a vocation to the community. By 1971, it had become a house of prayer and retreat center. A new milestone came in 1942 with the completion of a larger red brick chapel built to welcome 300 worshipers. The ministry of the Sisters of St. Francis at the shrine continued faithfully for nearly 9 decades. Their service concluded in 1990, but their legacy remains firmly woven into its history and spirit. In 2009, Bishop David Ricken opened a formal church investigation into the apparitions experienced by Adele Brise. After careful study, on December 8, 2010, he officially approved the 1859 apparitions, declaring them of supernatural character and worthy of belief. The Shrine of Our Lady of Good Help was thereafter recognized as a diocesan shrine, drawing pilgrims by the tens of thousands each year. On March 19, 2016, the site was solemnly declared a national shrine. Then, in October 2023, the shrine received a new name, Our Lady of Champion, reflecting the modern-day location of the apparitions in the community of Champion, Wisconsin, formerly Robinsonville. This aligns it with other Marian sites throughout the world, named for their location, such as Our Lady of Lourdes, Our Lady of Fatima, and Our Lady of Guadalupe. The Solemnity of Our Lady of Champion is celebrated on October 9th. While many reported miracles remain anecdotal, for those who have experienced healing, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, there is proof enough in the crutches, canes, and braces that have been left behind. One remarkable account tells of a healing mass at the shrine in 2017, during which a man long crippled and unable to walk suddenly stood and ran toward the priest. Yet even beyond such physical healings, countless more souls have found within those quiet grounds the greater miracles of conversion, peace of mind, and reconciliation with God. The apparitions of Our Lady of Champion were never meant solely for Wisconsin, nor even for the United States. They were then, and are now, a message for the entire world, a timeless call to prayer, penance, and conversion. In our present age, when many hearts hunger for spiritual light and truth, Mary's words carry both urgency and hope. Those who are able to journey to the shrine speak of the profound serenity that seems to envelop the chapel, where a deep peace that defies explanation seems to embrace them. But even for those unable to go, Mary's message remains within reach, to be carried in the quiet of every believing heart. Go and do not fear. I will help you. Prayer to Our Lady of Champion. O dear Lady of Champion, you revealed yourself as the Queen of Heaven to your servant Adele. I ask you to hear the deepest longings of my heart as I pray most earnestly for, here mention your request. Dear Lady, you told Adele, and you say to all of us, do not be afraid, I will help you. Help me now as I place this intention with complete confidence and trust. Our Lady of Champion, pray for us.